What's good, guys? We're back at it again with another video. As you see from the title, today we're going to be talking about HBCUs versus PWIs, specifically on the athletic side of things. If you guys don't know what an HBCU is, it's a historical black college or university. PWI is a predominantly white institution. And for this video right here, it's something that I've thought about making for a while. Just wasn't sure of the timing of it because it is such a polarizing topic to talk about. But it is the perfect time, obviously, with Deion Sanders just taking the job at Colorado. And when you look on the internet, you see a lot of uproar, backlash, people just not agreeing with what he did. They're saying like, oh, he was supposed to be the champion of the SWAC, the champion of HBCUs, and he just jumped at the first opportunity to make more money, to be in a bigger program. But one thing that I've noticed, when I see these people who don't agree or they have hateful comments, they've never been an athlete at a PWI, nor have they been one at a HBCU, so they don't really know the differences. Luckily for you guys, I've done both. I was at a PWI for my first 3 years of college and went to a HBCU for my senior year, so I can speak to those differences and let you guys know. Let's jump right into it. Keep in mind, as I go throughout this video, it's not my intention to offend anyone. I'm just going to be as honest as possible. Also, my word is not law. I'm pretty sure there are other student athletes all around HBCUs that have had other experiences. I'm just going to speak to mine specifically, just things that went on in my day-to-day life going from that PWI to HBCU. So the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is the facilities. And when I say facilities, I don't just mean arenas, because if we compare the arena that I had at the PWI I was at versus the one at the HBCU I was at, Graham probably could seat a little bit more, but what I'm really talking about is the training room where you're rehabbing at, the weight room where you lift, the cafe where you're eating at, even the academic buildings. We'll start off talking about the training room first, because for a player like myself, a player that got hurt a lot, quote unquote injury prone, I was in the training room a lot. So actually my first day at Graham, the first place I went to was the training room. And that was actually the first thing I noticed, just the pretty vast difference between the mid-major I was at, not a high major, the mid-major I was at and the HBCU I was at, because at Gulf Coast we had cold tub, hot tub, Normatec, massage chairs. It was a really big facility, but at Graham, it was a bit smaller, and all the technology that we had at the PWI, we didn't have at Graham. But here's the catch though. I will say this, even though we didn't have those expensive resources that I did have at Gulf Coast, we had a little bit more of a cost-effective version at Graham, but I also felt like the trainers at the HBCU I was at, I felt like they cared a little bit more, and I felt like it was a little bit more of a family type of environment, that they actually were invested in getting me back healthy. Not to say that I didn't feel that at certain times when I was at that PWI, but I felt it a little bit differently, like, okay, this person is actually legitimately invested in getting me back healthy. When we would have jokes when I was at PWI that the only thing that they tell us to do is ice and stem. Well, that's the difference for me on that aspect. And that's something that a lot of people have to realize. If you're an athlete, your aspirations is to get to the professional level one day, you are going to have to think about, okay, do I go here where they might not have the expensive top of the line ways to get me back on the court? Or do I go to this place where it might not feel as, homey, caring, but they do have those things, and I might actually get back on the court faster? Is something you just have to think about. It's pretty much the same type of situation with the rest of the facilities, whether it be the weight room or the academic buildings or the CAF or, like I said, the training room. The biggest differences that I could see right away was, okay, the funding was there for these top of the line expensive things at the PWI, but at the HBCU, the funding isn't there. Like I said, the training room at the two different schools, they're so different, because at the HBCU, the money isn't there to buy the top of the line resources, gadgets, technology. Maybe the academic buildings aren't as new or up to date because the funding isn't there. Maybe you don't have your own specific weight room, and I didn't have that at either school because the funding just isn't there. Shout out to Deion for creating those same facilities that I said I didn't have at Jackson State. Just by creating those facilities, he's changed the whole culture at Jackson State, because for a 17 to 18-year-old kid, and I go take a mid-major to high major visit first, and I see all the flat screens everywhere, and I see they got all the top-of-the-line technology. I even got a flat screen in my locker. And when I go to a HBCU and I take a visit and I see, okay, maybe my locker is a little bit closer to how it was in high school, and maybe, they don't have all the things that I just saw when I took this visit. What do you think a 17 to 18-year-old is going to do? I didn't commit to UAB when I was getting recruited because they were an Under Armour school. I've never said that publicly, but I didn't go there because they wore Under Armour. So what do you think other 17 to 18-year-olds are making decisions based off? Another noticeable difference that I saw between the HBCUs and PWIs is the travel situation, right? When I was at Gulf Coast, and keep in mind that is a mid-major, not a high major. We didn't have the charter flights. The only charter flight I think I went on was when I went to the NIT. But for the most part, we would fly commercial, fly in the day before, fly out the day after the game. But when I go to my HBCU, all of a sudden I realized, and again, the funding isn't there. So guess what? We can't take as many flights as I did at the mid-major level, especially in the SWAC, where all the schools are in neighboring states. And a lot of the schools aren't close to airports. We'll talk about that next, about the location of a lot of these schools. So I found myself taking 8-hour, 9-hour, longer drives that I just wasn't used to taking, being a Division I college basketball player. Not to mention that maybe the hotels that we're staying in aren't as nice as the ones that I was used to staying in at the mid-major level, not even the high major level. Also, when we're traveling, people forget that meals also have to happen when you're traveling. So the meals that we're having on the road aren't the same as the catered or call ahead, or we're going to a pretty nice restaurant. At the mid-major level, at the HBCU level, is something different. Maybe we have to just go to a fast food restaurant. Things like that happen, and it's something that people have to take into account when talking about, HBCUs versus PWIs, and okay, should we just stay here or should we try to go to another school? And probably the biggest difference between HBCUs and PWIs, and there's a reason why I waited to talk about this to the end, because I think this is probably the more, controversial, serious part of this topic, is the environment. Where these schools are, what happens around these schools. Like, it's something that has to be talked about, that not many people actually bring up or, bring into the discussion when you speak on Deion making these moves, or kids not actually going to HBCUs or not staying and want to transfer out. It's something that you don't really realize until you're on campus and you're there and you're living there. And I actually saw someone say something about it before on the internet. They said that a lot of HBCU schools are in places that would be considered technological, dead zones, dead spots, in the country, away from the cities, away from the places where there is a lot of technological advancement. I'll even tell you guys this, like when I was at Graham, I couldn't get an Uber. I actually had to call an actual taxi service from the town that would come around so I can go get a haircut when my car broke down. Situations like that, like I said, you don't realize until you're in it. And there's another aspect of it that I want to be extremely specific when I talk about, and intentional. And Deion touched on it a little bit when he was giving his speech to his new Colorado players. If you guys go watch it, he said, yeah, all these facilities, top of the line stuff you guys have, like my kids will go crazy over. Even the environment that you guys are in, there isn't a lot of crime. A lot of people might not have caught that. But I caught it for a specific reason, because I've been at an HBCU, and I will say this, because a lot of the HBCU schools are, at least some of the SWAC schools, the SWAC school that I went to, are in the country, are a little bit out there. In the towns that they're located in, there isn't really a lot of economic growth, economic stability, a lot of money being passed through those towns. There are instances where a player, an athlete, an individual might not feel 100% safe all the time. But let me also say this as well, right? And I talked about it a little bit when we talked about the training room. I didn't really realize this until maybe a couple weeks in, when I just looked up and I realized, like, wait a second, I move a little bit differently around campus, and I talk a little bit differently. I talk a little bit more freely, and my relationship with my coaches is a little bit different. And that's because I was around a lot of people that were the same color as me. And let's be completely 100% honest. When we look at the rosters of college basketball teams, college football teams, most of the roster is Black, African American. And that's one thing that I can say about HBCUs, is I definitely felt that sense of family. Like I said, with the training staff, even though some of them weren't actually Black, I still felt a sense of family, a sense of connection, a sense of caring about you as an individual. When at PWIs, sometimes you can feel like a number, but I will say that on the HBCU campus, it does feel a little bit more of a family. So a person could say, oh, it's in the country, there's this and that going on in that area. But at the same time, honestly, what you feel in terms of, connection with your student body is something that I couldn't have gotten anywhere else. And that's something that I have to tell you guys about. But all in all, throughout this video, I just wanted to tell you guys some of the differences that I personally saw from my experiences at a HBCU and at a PWI. And in my personal opinion, the biggest difference between the two is the funding. Talked about it before. Almost everything in this video that I've talked about comes back to the funding. One school has more money than the other, so this school gets to take more flights. This school gets more top-of-the-line technology, and it isn't just the funding of the school as well. It's the funding for the town surrounding the school because, like I said, a lot of the HBCU schools are out in the country, in towns where there isn't a lot of economic growth. So if an individual did what, let's just say, a Deion Sanders did, which is go to Jackson State and create these facilities that I said I didn't have. Create different standards for travel. Basically, bring new funding to the city of Jackson and the surrounding areas. And you will start to see those 5-star recruits that Deion got, all these extra talented recruits. They will start to go the HBCU route. He did what he had to do at Jackson State. Like, share, subscribe, turn on post notifications. I appreciate you guys watching. Remember, if you want the one-on-one evaluations with the breakdowns, go on the channel. Hit my website, btibasketball.com, in the description. Also, if you have any questions for me, need any advice, hit my link for Noodle in the description. I appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you guys next time for the next video.